Hello YouTube and the Indian motorcycle community. My name is Brandon Davidson and I am the owner of Davidson Audio, where we specialize solely in the Indian motorcycle audio solutions for you. In today's video, we are going to be doing a disassembly video on a brand new 2022 Indian Challenger Dark Horse in that beautiful black smoke. So enough of the talking, let's go ahead and get this bike disassembled. All right, now it's time to actually get this bike disassembled. So one of the first things I like to do is protect the parts that we aren't going to be taking off. So pretty much the one unpainted part that we aren't going to be taking off is the front fender of the bike. And with how much work we're going to be doing up here, I do like to provide some protection for this front fender. So what I like to do is I take these nice soft rags, or I don't know what you'd call this, a blanket, towel, whatever. It's really nice and soft, and this is all I use these for. So what I like to do is just take this, route it through the fender, make sure we're covered, which we're gonna have to unfold again. Actually, we're going to refold this the length. Yeah. So take this, gonna fold it the long way so that way we get a nice length to it and cover the whole fender. So then we feed it through the forks, make sure it goes down. Yep, so both sides of the fender are protected. And then what I like to do is we're gonna end up taping it on there, but first, give it a nice little tuck underneath the tire up into the fender on the front and the rear. And actually you can just kind of tuck this. Just depends on what you're gonna use. A lot of people might wanna use like a shipping blanket or something. I just like these because of how soft they are. And I don't like to actually tape the painted parts of these bikes because I'm just worried about the tape actually peeling off. Maybe there's like a little flake or something, like a rock chip, and I don't want to cause any more damage. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start actually disassembling this bike. So while we're up in the front, we're going to take off the bezel around the headlight. So to do that, there's actually this bezel piece. So what I do is I put my thumb down in the front of the finger, grab it like this, and you're gonna pull from the back side, and then it's gonna release it. So with that, it exposes 3 screws that we're gonna have to take off. But what I wanna do is I like to take off the quick little pieces. So next we're gonna go to the inside of the fairing and pop off the speaker grills. So now that we're on the inside of the fairing, what I like to do is remove both speaker grills. So to do this, there's a bunch of little clips, snaps that hold this in. So you just gotta pry it out. I like to use a metal pry tool, and I put a little bit of tape on the end of it just for some added protection. And what I would personally recommend is if maybe you're new to doing this or this is your first attempt or what have you, I would really recommend, they make some plastic version pry tools for like interior trim and whatnot. I would highly recommend getting a plastic one because that just minimizes your chance of scratching anything. So let me see if I can turn these bars to get a better angle. So where I like to start is on this outer edge, and I actually use my hand too. So I get up in here underneath that seal. Come on, there we go. And then you just pop it up, and then the rest of it, you'll just use your hands to get that off. And as I said, you've got 4 clips. So let's go ahead and get the other side done real quick. And we'll go ahead and set these both aside real quick. All right, now that we have the speaker grills off both sides, what we're gonna wanna do next is you're gonna wanna open up the cubby, and then there's this plastic rubber enclosure piece. So you're gonna wanna take this off and set it aside to expose another screw that we're gonna need. So we'll close this for right this second. But for this part, we're gonna be removing 3 screws on this side, 3 on the other, and then we've got 3 in the front fairing to get this fairing off. So these screws are a combination of 4mm, one here, one right in here, and then there's a 6mm all the way down here, same on both sides. And in the front fairing, there's 3 6mm screws. So what I like to use, I use an electric ratchet and a small miniature 1/4 inch ratchet. These are both 1/4 inch drive. And then here I have an assortment of 4mm extension with two 6mm to get in those tighter spots. So let's go ahead and start by removing the 4mm screws. So we're going to use this longer one first. And then it's right up here in the top. Just make sure you be careful. And then just, so that's the one screw. As you can see, there's a washer on and a fat head. So we'll put this in our container. All right, now we're going to take our 4mm. We're going to come down here to the one down here in the pocket. Now we're going to take our very shallow and small ratchet on our 6mm. And this screw is down here at a slight angle. So what we're going to do is we're going to find, there we go. And there's your 6mm. So let's go ahead and put that in the container. We will go to the other side and get that one done next. Just like the other side, we're going to start by removing the little cubby, but what's different on this side is your USB drive is on this one. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pull this out, hold on to here and just kind of pull it right on out, close the flap. You can just set that down here or you can tuck it back up out of the way. There's the first one. Open this back up to expose right here in this spot again. All right, now let's go to the front of the fairing and get that off too. Now that we're back at the front of the bike, there's 3 6mm screws, 1, 2, and then 3 up here. But first, one thing I like to do is make the 3 wire connections, take those apart, because what'll happen is you'll take this all apart, you'll forget those, and now you're trying to juggle holding your fairing and trying to get those. So those are located right down here. There's 2 of them right here. So I'm gonna get those. There's 1. There's 2, and then the third one is all the way over here. Now that we've taken apart the 3 wiring connections down at the bottom, now we can go ahead and remove these 3 6mm in the front fairing. Now don't worry about your fairing falling off when you take these off, because Polaris, or Indian, sorry, put retention tabs on this side and this upper corner. So there's actually 2 tabs that hold this fairing on. That you can pull it away, but they just hold the fairing in place. So let's go ahead. I got my long extension on here. All right, now it's time to go ahead and get this fairing pulled on off. So now that we have all the screws removed from the fairing, you can remove it. So like I said before, there's 2 retention pieces, 1 on each side. So if you were to just pull this off, it holds itself right there. So what I like to do is I hold down on the inside here and up here, and I pull it, give a little bit of a flex. Oh, and because he's got an aftermarket, he's got the... So one thing I did not realize is if you get the OEM adaptive headlight, there's also this T-harness in there as well. So if you do have this, that's another connection that you have to worry about. So let's go ahead and get this set aside, and then we'll get the rest of the bike torn apart. Now that the front fairing is disassembled and removed off the bike, now we're going to work our way towards the back side of the bike. So one thing we have to work on first is removing the seat. So to start that, you got to remove the side panels, which these are just held on by a couple pressure connectors. They're just like plastic nipples that go into a rubber bushing. So to do this, I like to be careful. You're going to take up here and then you're going to pry just a little bit. You're going to come back here, underneath here. Just like that. And then you're going to carefully pull it off. And like I said, Indian has got 3 connectors on this, and then there's rubber bushing on here that it just kind of presses itself in. So with that, we're going to set this aside. And that will expose us to a couple of things. First being the bolt that holds the seat on, and then the saddlebag wiring connection, which this bike also has the saddlebag lights. So we're gonna go ahead and disconnect these now so we don't forget them. We're just gonna set those down aside. And we're gonna take this off. This will be another 6mm bolt. And we'll put this in our little container. And let's go on over to the other side and we'll get that side down. We'll get the seat removed and then we'll get working on these saddlebags. And just like the clutch side, we're gonna do the exact same thing on the brake side of the bike. This one came off a lot easier, so we're gonna slide it forward. And the same thing, we got a 6mm here and then the 2 wiring connections. This one's for the aftermarket saddlebag lights. This one is the OEM one. This one does the lock assembly, the electric locks, and it also does a 12-volt port. So that's why this is a 4-pin connector versus the other side is a 2. I'm not sure if you can see it, but this customer has a custom aftermarket Sissy Bar on this bike. So we're gonna go ahead and remove that. So that way we can get the seat off and then we can proceed working on disassembling this bike. So to take these off, this is on the quick disconnect, just like the Indian OEM one is. So what I like to do, this isn't necessary, but I like to open up the saddlebags just because it gives us just a little bit more room between that. And then back here, there's one quick disconnect. There's another one, which this one's on there pretty good. All right, and now that you have both of these fully up, then you just lift it from the back and then you pull it straight on back. So we'll set that aside as well. Now we can go ahead, close our lids, and let's go ahead and pull this seat off. All right, now that we have the side covers off, both 6mm bolts removed, and we've taken off the aftermarket Sissy Bar / backrest for the passenger, let's go ahead and remove this seat. It's real simple. You're just going to scoot it back. And this one is new. So as you saw, our struggle for a second is this bike has probably never had the seat off and it's brand new. So you're gonna lift up on the back just a little bit and you're gonna grab from either here or here, and you're gonna push it back and then lift up. And as you can see, they've got 2 tabs right here, which correspond to 2 tabs here in the gas tank. And then back here is this pocket, which this stud back here aligns into and locks it in. So when you go to put it back on, you gotta push it down and then push it back up into the bike. So let's get this aside. Because now this has exposed some bolts because we're gonna pull the gas tank next because we're gonna need access back here. So let's go ahead and reposition ourselves. We'll get this gas tank removed and then we will work on the saddlebags. All right, now that we have the seat off, this is gonna be kind of hard to see, but now we're gonna tape the fuel tank. And the first part I like to start with, because if I don't start here, then I'll forget and then I'll be trying to wrestle the tank off, is we gotta disconnect the fuel line from the injector lines here. So there is one fuel line coming from the tank here, and then there's a quick disconnect here. It's kind of hard to see, but what I like to do is I take a shop rag towel and I put it, it's all right, down in here to help catch any of the fuel. Now this isn't gonna catch all of it, but it's at least something so that way you don't have this dripping all over your bike. So you can kind of rotate it. You gotta get your fingers in there top and bottom, and then it just comes right on off. So I like to try to rotate it to get whatever fuel is out of that line. And then we're just gonna leave that there because we got some 2 bolts, a overfill line, and then the electrical connector. So let's go back up top and get that stuff doing. All right, now that we have the fuel line disconnected, this is where taking out the tank, the 2 bolts here are gonna be the same, but the fuel pump is where it changed. So I'm pretty certain in 21, maybe 22, whenever they put the power switch up here from down here, the fuel pump wiring connector moved. So on the 20 for sure, and I'm pretty certain the 21s, the fuel pump connector's here. But on the newer South, you have the button up there, your connector's now up front underneath here. So let's go ahead, on all these, this part's gonna be the same. Your fuel overflow vent line is right here. This is if you were to overflow your fuel up here into the cap, the line runs down here. So this simple plastic line, rubber, and then we have 2 more 6mm. So let's go ahead and take those off. Just set these aside because we're actually gonna put them right back in to lift this tank up. And I just like to grab right here, keep my, and we're gonna take the bushings and everything off just because these just like to fall off. And when they fall down this backbone area, they're not fun to find, especially the rubber bushings because obviously rubber's not magnetic. So we're gonna pull these off. And all this is that holds on the fuel tank is there's this rubber or this metal stud with a washer on it. And then you got 2 isolator bushings that go in here like this. So when this goes through the tank, it fits in this groove. And then you have this other one here and your tank sits here in this rubber to isolate it. So we're just gonna go ahead and put this back on the bike. So that way, 1, we don't misplace them, and 2, it helps hold this tank up for us just a little bit. We need to go up towards the front of the bike and get this fuel pump taken out, disconnected. All right, like I said, this is the part that changes on the newer year bikes. Like I said, the 20s, the fuel pump's back there. The newer models where the power button's up on the handle, the fuel pump connectors and everything are underneath this. So it's gonna be another 4mm right here. We're just gonna pop this off. We'll just set this aside because we're gonna put this cover right back on. Push forward, lift up. And let's actually pull the tank back a little bit so we can get room for this. And we'll set this aside for a second. 2 electrical connectors that we have to remove. This is the first one. Just this little, I believe that's a 4-pin. So that, and then the other larger 4-pin. We're just gonna pull the fuel line up just a little bit to get some room underneath here. Put the fuel line back on, we're gonna go ahead and put this cover back on. So again, you can see there's a groove here in the bolt hole here, which corresponds to this stud here, and then this hole here. So we're just gonna simply, you go past it, and you find that groove. No, we're not in it yet. There we go. You're gonna find that groove. You're just gonna take our 4mm, and we're just gonna finger tighten it. We got the fuel pump disconnected. We disconnected the fuel line down this one side, the vent line, and we've got the 2 bolts removed. There's no bolts in the front holding this tank in. So all you have to simply do is grab back here and then grab up here in the middle, and you're gonna lift up and pull back. And one thing to note, we are putting all our parts on 2 nice clean shipping blankets. But when I put the fuel tank down, I always put a piece of cardboard down because there's always just a little bit of fuel left in that fuel line and I don't want it ruining that. So just note that when you go take yours off, put it down on something that you're not afraid to get some fuel back. But for the install that we're doing, we're going to be replacing the lid with an 8-inch Ruthless Designs audio lid without a tweeter. So what I'm gonna do in this part is we're gonna focus on taking out the lock mechanism, and we're gonna disassemble the lid while it's already on the bike. This helps us prevent any scratching or damaging of the lid while trying to fumble this around with holding the saddlebag. So you're gonna need 4mm bolts here in the hold the lid to the hinge. Then we're gonna use a 5mm skirt bolts here to remove the whole lock mechanism and get to the wiring connection back here. And then we're gonna pull the whole lid off. But if you were to just remove the saddlebag, you would just need a simple 6mm. Take these two off and take the whole bag right on off. So let's go ahead and disassemble this lid. And for me, I just like to put the screws back in here. Sure as I don't lose them. Now, like I said, we're gonna use the 5mm, take these out, but first, I'll just worry about the wiring connection last. And then here, when you take the second one out, you're gonna wanna hold the latch, the handle from the back side. And then from here, we'll just set that aside. I like to push the tumbler through, just like that. And then here, we'll even push the seal out because we're gonna need this on the aftermarket lid. So what I like to do is I just put this back together. We're gonna set this aside for a second. And then here, we're gonna route the wiring harness out, hold these two in here, and then here it's just a simple little push. This comes on out. And I just push it so that way it doesn't come apart. Just like that, your lock assembly is all together and safe. So let's go ahead and set this aside on our mat. And now let's get the remainder of the lid taken off. So you can do this a couple different ways. You got 4 bolts that hold the lid to the actual hinge. And then you have 2 silver bolts on the outside. This is where the hinge cover is held onto the lid. So for right now, I'm not gonna worry about the hinge cover. I wanna leave it on here. So I just like to take the seal, pull it back just a little bit. And all this is it's a groove down. It's got probably sticks out into this groove. And then I just like to support it with the bottom of my pants here. And then I just start removing these. And again, these are also 4mm. So. And then you're just gonna wanna slide the lid right off the hinge. And now we have a complete assembly lid. And at this point, if you would like, you can press this seal back in. Super simple. But in this application, we will not be using this lid again. So we're gonna go ahead and set this aside. Now, this part is what's different from the clutch side saddlebag and the brake side saddlebag, and that is the fact that this side of the bag, especially in the Dark Horse and the premiums, in the base model, you can add this wiring harness when you add the locks. So we're gonna pull this wiring harness out, but you have a 12-volt port here. So you're gonna pull the wiring connectors out. You got a negative and positive, you can't mix them up. Just gonna set that aside for right now. We'll just let the port come out with the lid, and when we're ready to, we'll swap it over to the new lid. So we'll get the rest of this lid off just like the other side. One thing I didn't know on the other side that I ended up doing is I like to just put all the hardware back where it came from on most parts, just because then I don't have to worry about misplacing it. So we're just gonna finger tighten these in here. And just like that, we've disassembled both saddlebags. So let's go on to the audio install.